the writer's process. Yay! Okay. I actually like the topic about the writer's process. The writer's process is a long process. It can last you a lifetime. But it really depends of what you make of it. And why I say that? Because the writing process is all about what you do. Yes. So you can be the plotter that you always dreamed of setting up the world and knowing what your characters are going to do at that exact moment and how it's going to go through all the way till the end of the story. Or you can be a pantser who just loves to write the story that whatever it comes in his or her head and just boo 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 boo, okay, gotcha, and I'm done with the story. The writer's process, well, you can have your own definition of that. What is the writer's process to me? Well, the writer's process is a ongoing process that you can do whatever you want with it, and you can like kind of skip things and really make it your own. And really, you can even twist up the definition like I just did and like find a different definition for it, or the writer's process might mean something different to you, or like maybe like 10 years from now what I said here might not be what I literally mean. I could say the writing process is miserable, or the writing process is just a long haul, or you know what I mean? There's so many different definitions of the writer's process, but the writer's process is really what you make of it. There's my definition. Boom. All right. But before we actually get into the writer's process, we got to go through like a brief overview of the steps. First of all, it all starts with an idea. What story comes to you? What is that story that you really, really want to talk about? That you cannot escape from? You cannot get over it until you get that onto the page. That's the ultimate question when you come with an idea. Hopefully a premise. A premise is what the story or whatever you're trying to get across. What is that all about? Now, the ideas are little branches that comes from the premise that you build. And think of the premise of the story and your ideas as a foundation of a place that's under construction. Yes, you are the manufacturer, the constructor of that building, and your goal is to finish it, and hopefully it's out there and all that stuff. So, you have your idea. The next part is to actually write the story. So, you want to write the story that you want to tell. In order to do that, you got to sit down in your desk or wherever you feel like that's most comfortable and write the story, whether it's by hand or device or whatever people write on these days, right? And then let me stop right there really quick. If you're like, okay, I want to write this, the goal is to finish the story. Okay? Finish the story. Very important. I'll get back to that very soon. All right. But if you want to take it one step further, you want to actually see it polished and clean and want something to brag about. Let's go to the editing stage, shall we? So you are basically fixing it. You're going in there like, I'll say a grammar police and trying to find things to take out or put in and all that stuff. And you're kind of playing a detective. Detective was what I was looking for. Okay, yes, I love it. I love it so much. Now I can share this to my friends and family and all that stuff. No, wait. But what if, okay, I'm going a little ambitious here, but I want to publish it. Okay, so you want to publish it now. Okay, you gotta do marketing. You gotta talk about your book. You gotta be comfortable about certain things. There are gonna be reviews and all that stuff. But really, what we're talking about today is the writer's process. So you can kind of ignore the editing and publishing for today, because all this is about the writer's process of what you want to tell. All right. So the writer's process. It can be easy and it can be hard. And it can definitely be both at the same time. So the easy part about the process is that you have an idea that you really want to tell, and you want to tell everyone all about it, but you don't want to forget about it. So what you do, you're going to write it down. But the hard part is actually writing the whole thing. See what I did? So let's start easy again. Okay? I have my idea in my head. I plan it all out. I have my pencil, pen, I have whatever materials that are in my reach, and I just write. I just write. And whew, it's so amazing. And writing is actually meant to be fun. Don't make it to where it's like, oh, it's a chore. I have to write every single day. If I don't have this certain word count by the end of the day, I have to grind myself through the night and be super tired in the morning and do this all over again. No, you're gonna burn yourself out eventually. Part of me wants to get to the hard part, because that's like let's go to the hard part. Okay, the hard part is literally the consistency. Okay, so based on what I said, making writing a chore and burning yourself out, well, you need to find consistency. And that's really, really challenging. Like, you need to find that sweet spot in your day, or a great day in your week to dedicate your time to write. And that's not always easy. I can admit that. And my first example is going to be when I started writing, I was writing murder mysteries. I dedicated my weekends of expanding murder mysteries and writing it down and finishing the book and all that stuff. I knew my worst days of writing were Wednesdays. That was my most unavailable day of the week. I kind of hated Wednesdays because of that. And yeah, that was early on. But throughout my writing process, I kind of had to find that sweet time that I could write. And yeah, it wasn't a particular day, it was a particular time, a very particular time frame during the day. And it was like mix and match. And I found out that the late afternoon into the night was my best time. I know. That's something. Yeah, I'm more of a night owl, not a day person, but I am quite productive during the day. But it's nighttime. It's nighttime. But you need to be consistent with that. And I'm not saying write every single day, because you're gonna lead to burnout. Maybe find like a few days out of the week to spend time to write. But if that doesn't come to you, don't just force yourself, because forcing yourself to write does not sound fun. Then it goes back to it becoming a chore. And we want to avoid writing being a chore. Okay, I guess I'll give an exception if you have a very particular deadline for a publisher, then you gotta kind of pick up the pace. But we're not talking about that, okay? Let's say we have all the time in the world, we have the control and power and no one has the final say except for me, okay? Or that would be you. So, the writer's process. We're going to briefly talk about the beginning page, the first page, okay? So you have all your ideas, right? You have everything you need to write this story. But when you get to the first page, the first blank page, the first page is actually one of the hardest pages to get through. Why? Because it's blank. You have nothing on the page. And it's good to write messy and all that stuff for your first draft and all, but you want to make it clear enough so that you're not like, I wrote that? That's awful. So, yeah, like, don't overthink the first page, but at the same time, make the first page like your first impression, like, boom, I love this. I want to keep going till the end, which is the last page. So, yeah. But once you get through that first page, I'm telling you, it gets slightly easier, okay? Because you're like on a roll. You're like, woo! I really have this story under control. I'm writing it like as fast as I can, and I really, really know what I'm doing. Until you reach a certain point in your story that you're like, I wish I knew better. And that's what's expected, because you'll get so much momentum and you like, whoop, roadblock. And like I said, that completely happens. That's completely understandable. It could be some type of writer's block, and sometimes you might have to distance yourself from the story in order to get back to it. Or maybe work so hard to get back to the story that you're originally focusing on by just keep writing. And sometimes you might have to keep writing in order for the story and its juice to come back to you. I wouldn't recommend that. I would probably distance myself for a little bit and give myself time and allow the words to come to me, and then I go back to writing. Or I could find something else to work on temporarily. I don't have to finish it, but that gives me some time and I get to refresh and get back to the story I really, really want to tell and tell my friends about. So, have you heard about the sloppy middle? Yeah, the sloppy middle. Because that is like pretty much that little balance, that bridge between what happened at the beginning of the story and what's going to happen to the end. That middle ground of how the rest of the story is going to go. And let me tell you don't want to throw it all away. So make sure your middle makes sense. And why do I call it a sloppy middle? Because the middle can go anywhere. I know I said that with your writing process, like it goes anywhere, like is what you make of it. But really the middle is like that make or break. Because if you do something terribly wrong, there are wrong ways you can do it. I'm not saying there's one correct way, but if you do it wrong and it's severe enough, your ending is going to go downhill and probably crashing somewhere. So that's why I call it a sloppy middle. And it could feel a little sloppy, and you might be going through some more writer's block. It might be the worst, but it's really how you make of it, and it's kind of testing you of if you're going to overcome that. So that does happen. But at the same time, in the middle, there could be certain plot lines or subplot or whatever, like some extra stuff that comes into play, and you're trying to figure out what to do with it. And for it to make it to the end, that definitely happens. And when it comes to the middle, it's like really like what are you gonna do about it? So let's see. I guess I'll use one of mine for example. So Mermaid Mysteries, my first book, I had a little trouble with that. That's whenever I was less reliant on my original script that I had for it. And I was like, let me go outside the box. And that was like a defining moment in my writing process that I was like, I'm going to get out of my comfort zone that based on the script I wrote from it, I'm going into make it my own while it's still Mermaid Mysteries. So yeah, and it actually worked really well. It actually worked really well. I got to the end point that I want to tell, and boom. And now I have a 3-book series. And yeah. And speaking of 3-book series, this is gonna be funny. When you're writing a series, that's what makes the writing process even more interesting because those books in the series are parts, and it feels like you're finished with that book or you're not finished with the process because you have parts of the book. The most common ones that I hear about are trilogies. So the middle book, if you hear about middle book syndrome, that's fun because it's the middle of the process. You want to avoid filler. You want to make sure it connects with the first book, and whatever second book has, it leads up to the final book and it makes sense. And then yeah, that's fun. Because whenever I wrote my my sequel book for Mermaid Mysteries, ain't gonna reveal the title yet. It was very interesting because I started out based on my original script, and then I kind of ditched it mostly, and you know it was really great. Obviously, the better book, but you know it had its moments as well. And I was like, and I was actually at a point that I wasn't going to finish that book. That means I wasn't going to finish the series, and it made me. It actually tested me and my endurance with keeping the story going. And really, it was a test. It was really a test. So like how bad did I want to finish that story? And that took me a few days. And when I finally had that kind of inspiration in a way, like, oh, you know what? That's how I should do it. And once I got out of that writer's block, or however many days I was just stuck, I was able to finish that story and begin the third book. And that's a long story of itself that I can talk about because the third book, I had a lot of writer's block. It started around chapter 5, and really, I couldn't even get past the first act of the story. Whenever I imagined the story in my head, like I imagined the story in my head multiple times, and I couldn't get past like the beginning, and it was awful. It was really awful. I was like, yeah, that's like really awful. And when I wrote the third book, I had a lot of writer's block. I had a lot of setbacks that would keep me from writing the third book, and it took me a year to finish. So yeah, that's a lot to say about that. So back to the writer's process, all right? I know I was like kind of talking about my series, but I wanted to tease it so bad. So okay, the writing process. I actually want to talk about the time length. So when it comes to how long it takes you to write a book, it doesn't matter how long it takes you. You could be told, like Tolkien, take 20 years, but you can also be a very quick writer to write it in a month or two. That was me with my first 2 books until we know. Yeah. But the time that you spend with writing that story can take you a long way. I mentioned that I'm working on this novel, and I've been working on it for over 2 years. I haven't been writing it for months. That tells you something, but I'm almost done with the book. And part of that is like, school and other stuff that does not relate to my book, and posting videos. Let's see, I'm trying to list stuff, y'all. Let's see, not writing, and I'll say all of that is an excuse from finishing the story and getting through your writer's process. And I know it wasn't the nicest thing to say for me calling all that an excuse, but when you are in your writer's process, you want as few distractions as possible. And it's good having a life outside of writing. I'm not saying like you had to lock yourself away in a dark tower and write until you finish the book. But what I'm really saying is, don't trap yourself in writing that you just don't have a life. And it's like, yeah, and eventually you're like, why isn't the world like this today? What is going on? Why is this happening? And and be all delusional about things. So it's very important to take breaks when needed. And if you need a extended amount of time, that's fine. But don't have everything in life that goes in your way. But don't have everything in life keep you like from writing. Because if you want to finish that story, finish the story. But don't have like but don't have an excess of excuses that like you haven't finished a book. And there are a lot of people that say they want to write a book, and they might start, but a lot of people don't finish it. I don't know exactly how far they get to or how long it took them, but I know for a fact that not a lot of people finish it. And one of those reasons could be those excuses that they make for themselves, or they might have been inconsistent, or there are countless of reasons. I'm just naming a few that's from the top of my head. But it's what you make of it. What you bring to the table is what's going to be there. And what you want to do, you want to keep producing, and you don't want there to be a shortage or something running out. With the writing process, there's always going to be something on there. It's all about what you make of it, and really if you want to keep going. Because you can call writing one and done, but if you have writing as a passion, if you want to go far with this writing, It's not a one and done. You're going through the process continuously. It's like a train that never ends. So when you are in the writer's process, treat it like a marathon. And of course, along the way, you might have some writer's block or roadblock or some certain types of circumstances that might keep you away from writing. But also, there's times that it's absolutely necessary to not write. And that's okay. Because with writing, there is no one correct way of doing things. But I'll tell you, there's a whole lot of ways you can do it wrong. Yeah, see how contradictory writing can be? But really, it's what you make of it. And you can follow the rules. You can definitely bend the rules, but you can also break the rules. And that's what I want to talk about as well with the writer's process. And I'll wrap it up here. So, when it comes to rules, I bet you watch endless writing videos, podcasts, and went to conventions and all that stuff. And there are these rules and guidelines and writers, authors, and all the people who loves to write follow, right? Not every rule is meant to be followed because, well, it's your writing, your process, and how you do things. And if you followed every rule, it would be a very generic, boring book. Yes, I'm saying that quite weirdly. But if you did follow every rule, it's just like, this isn't the story that the writer really wanted to tell. And your potential readers will tell if that is the case. So, instead, write the story that you want to tell. And with that, you're going to bend some rules. And it's okay to bend rules. Hey, it's definitely okay to break them too. I'm going to briefly talk about like the difference between bending the rules and breaking the rules. So, bending the rules in writing, you can play with it. And with writing, it's one of the things that you can do to play with. And, you make your own rules and like what you can do, what you can't do, and all that stuff. And that's what I mean about you can bend it. It's very flexible. Writing is very, very flexible. You can do whatever you want with it. That's why I'm saying that's how you can bend the rules and all that stuff. But breaking it? Okay. I bet breaking things is way more fun than just bending or just fixing. So breaking rules in writing, it's definitely okay, but if you have a person who really likes following the rules, they're gonna be like, you broke that rule. You weren't supposed to do this. This trope goes like this. No, this character should have been like this. Or, there's some grammar. That can happen. But remember that you are the writer and you have intentions of having that. And you have the right to break the rule. Writing rules are not always meant to be followed, but there are some basics that you should consider. And I was thinking about something in particular. I don't remember. But it went with rules and following them and bending and breaking. The writer's process is what you make of it. It's the story that you want to tell and brag to all your friends about. And don't worry, don't have anyone tell you what to do with your story.